The Vraxians had always believed themselves to be the supreme species among the vast expanse of the galactic conquered. Their homeworld was a place of harsh extremes, a high-gravity planet with a toxic atmosphere filled with poisonous gases, and deadly predators lurking at every turn. These dangers had shaped them into one of the most formidable species in the galaxy. Over countless centuries, they evolved thick exoskeletons for protection, redundant organs to ensure their survival, and an exceptional resistance to toxins that would have obliterated most other sentient beings. The Vraxians had survived and thrived in these brutal conditions, emerging as ruthless warriors capable of taking on even the most fearsome foes. For 3 centuries, the Vraxians had served as the military backbone of the galactic concord. They were the shield that protected the peaceful, less hostile races of the Concord from any external threats. Their reputation for strength and resilience was unmatched, and their role as defenders was unquestioned. Other species feared them, but they also respected them for their ability to endure the worst conditions and still stand tall. Commander Thrasgor, a Vraxian of great renown, stood on the observation deck of the conquered diplomatic vessel. His sharp mandibles twitched in irritation as he gazed out at the stars. As a warrior who had spent much of his life in the harshest of battles, he was rarely bothered by anything. Yet today, as they approached a newly discovered planet, his patience wore thin. He had seen countless planets and species over the years, many of which had been weak or unworthy of the conquered's attention. Now, they were on their way to meet yet another primitive species, one that had recently begun to explore the stars. It was a task he didn't care for, and the thought of it irritated him. Thrasgor muttered to himself, "I fail to understand why High Command insists on bringing every newly spacefaring race into the fold." His frustration was evident in his voice, though his demeanor remained composed, as was typical for a Vraxian commander. Beside him, Sub-Commander Creever, his trusted second-in-command, responded calmly. "It is protocol, Commander. We evaluate all potential members, even if they are soft-bodied." Soft-bodied. Thrasgor found the term amusing, if not a bit offensive. He knew that the species they were about to meet would likely be physically weak. They had seen the initial scans of the planet, Earth, as the humans called it, and it appeared to be a paradise world by the Concord standards. The scans revealed that Earth had a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, moderate gravity, and abundant liquid water. To the Vraxians, this meant a world where survival would be easy. It was the kind of world that produced species that were physically inferior, but capable of technological advancement. Such species were often useful for their innovations, but they lacked the ability to defend themselves without outside help. For centuries, the Vraxians had played the role of protectors, guarding these less capable races from any threats. But over time, they had grown tired of this role. They had grown weary of being the perpetual guardians for the conquered. As the diplomatic vessel descended toward Earth, the Vraxian delegation readied themselves for the task at hand. Thrasgor had personally selected 4 of his finest warriors to accompany him on the mission, ensuring that they were prepared for anything that might arise. These warriors were fierce, skilled in combat, and equipped with the latest Vraxian military technology. They would serve as a show of strength to any potential threat, and would ensure that the Vraxians remained in control of the situation. Alongside the Vraxian warriors were the Arcturan diplomats, fragile crystalline beings. From another peaceful world, the Arcturans were an ancient species known for their wisdom and diplomacy, but their physical fragility made them ill-suited for the dangers of space. The Vraxians had always been the protectors of the Arcturans, ensuring that their delicate bodies were shielded from harm in the dangerous corners of the galaxy. The mission was simple enough. Make contact with the humans, assess their potential as members of the Galactic Concord, and begin preliminary discussions on their potential membership. As the shuttle approached the designated landing site, AII military base located in a region known as Nevada, Thrasgore felt a strange sense of unease. The humans, who had been expecting their arrival, stood in neat formation, awaiting their first contact with the Vraxians. Thrasgore studied them closely. The humans were bipedal, smooth-skinned, and appeared to have no natural armor or visible, defensive adaptations. They were everything the Vraxians expected: weak, unprotected, and unremarkable in appearance. Thrasgore's keen senses scanned their bodies for any signs of unusual strength or abilities, but he found none. He quickly dismissed them as the soft-bodied creatures he had anticipated. Then, a human female stepped forward. She introduced herself as General Elena Reyes of the United Earth Defense Force and formally welcomed the Vraxians to Earth. Thrasgore's attention briefly shifted from the general's words to the readings on his suit's display. Something was wrong. The sensors showed unusually high levels of radiation in the area, radiation that should have been lethal to any unprotected organism. Thrasgore was confused. These humans wore no protective suits, and yet they stood confidently in the presence of radiation levels that would have been deadly to any other species, including his own. Thrasgore interrupted the general's greeting. "How do you survive such background radiation?" he demanded, his voice laced with disbelief. General Reyes smiled calmly. "Our cells have repair mechanisms. We evolved with it." Thrasgore exchanged a look with Sub-Commander Krever. The Vraxians were used to dangerous environments, but this was something entirely different. Radiation resistance was rare, even among the toughest species from the deadliest planets. The Vraxians were no strangers to death worlds, but they had never encountered a species that could survive in such an inhospitable environment without the need for technology or protective measures. As the meeting progressed, Thrasgore's unease grew. The humans casually spoke of testing grounds nearby, where they had detonated nuclear weapons far more powerful than anything the Concord possessed. They spoke of deep-sea expeditions where their vessels withstood crushing pressures that would have reduced a Vraxian battleship to scrap. They even discussed climbing expeditions to mountain peaks where the oxygen was too thin for most species to survive. Yet, despite all these extreme conditions, the humans seemed unaffected. To Thrasgore's amazement, they survived with ease, as though such dangers were mere inconveniences. It was clear to him now that Earth was no ordinary world. The species living on it were not the weak, soft-bodied creatures he had expected. The humans were far more resilient than he had ever imagined. The reality of their survival in such a harsh environment forced Thrasgore to reconsider everything he had known about the galaxy's hierarchy of strength. The Vraxians were no longer the undisputed apex predators. The humans had shown him something far more dangerous, a species capable of thriving in the face of challenges that would have destroyed most others. The journey to Earth had only just begun, but already Thrasgore realized that the humans were no ordinary species. They were something else entirely. And as the mission continued, he would soon learn just how unprepared the Vraxians were to face the true strength of Earth's inhabitants. The meeting between the Vraxians and the humans had begun with a simple greeting, but the moment General Elena Reyes spoke of the human species' resilience, Commander Thrasgore felt an unsettling shift. His sharp mandibles twitched as he observed the humans. They were nothing like he had expected. He had studied the data from their planet, noting their relatively unremarkable physical characteristics, their weak skin, and their inability to survive in extreme conditions without the aid of technology. Yet, as General Reyes spoke of humanity's endurance, a sense of disbelief filled Thrasgore. He had never encountered a species like this, one capable of surviving so many dangers without the need for armor, protective equipment, or technological enhancements. The humans had survived nuclear detonations, the crushing depths of the ocean, the blistering heat of desert storms, and even the freezing cold of the planet's polar caps. Each challenge seemed to make them stronger, not weaker. As the meeting continued, The Vraxian commander was struck by a growing unease. The humans had a resilience that defied all logic, all his expectations. He had seen planets ravaged by radiation, species wiped out by disease or environmental catastrophes, yet humanity had found ways to adapt, to evolve beyond the limitations of their biology. The Vraxians had always prided themselves on their strength, their ability to withstand the harshest of environments. Yet the humans had evolved to not only survive, but thrive in ways that seemed impossible. Thrasgor could not fathom how they had managed this without the aid of advanced technology or genetic engineering. There were no obvious signs of artificial enhancement, no cybernetic implants or force fields to protect them from the hostile elements around them. It was as though they had found a way to bypass nature's laws altogether, bending them to their will. The human general's calm demeanor only deepened Thrasgor's discomfort. She explained how the human body had adapted over centuries to withstand radiation, explaining how cellular repair mechanisms allowed their bodies to heal from damage that would have killed any other species. She spoke of how their DNA had evolved to the point where their cells could repair themselves from almost any injury. Their bodies, she claimed, had learned to thrive under conditions that would have destroyed even the most resilient species, from the deadliest planets the Vraxians had encountered. The general was almost nonchalant as she listed the various dangers humanity had overcome. Radiation, extreme temperatures, pressure, disease, famine. None of it had been able to wipe out humanity. In fact, it had only made them stronger. Thrasgor listened intently, trying to process this information, but it was difficult to reconcile with his understanding of the universe. The humans had managed to thrive in conditions that would have crushed most other species, and they had done so without the advanced weaponry, the genetic modifications, or the sheer physical superiority that many other races relied on. It was baffling. The more he listened, the more he realized that the humans were not like any species he had encountered before. Their strength did not lie in their bodies or their technology. It lay in their ability to adapt, to survive against all odds, and, perhaps, in that strange ability, lay the true power of humanity. Commander Thrasgor's mind raced as he considered the implications of this new information. The Vraxians had always considered themselves the apex species, the most resilient warriors in the galaxy. But now it seemed they were no longer the only ones with a claim to that title. The humans were something else entirely. They had not evolved through the same brutal processes that had shaped the Vraxians. They had adapted to their environment in ways that made them far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Thrasgor could feel his pride beginning to crack, his self-assurance faltering. How could a species so physically weak be so powerful? The thought unsettled him, gnawing at the back of his mind as the conversation continued. As the delegation moved to inspect the human facilities, Thrasgor and his warriors accompanied General Reyes through the military base. The human technology was rudimentary compared to the advanced systems the Vraxians had developed over centuries, yet there was something about it that felt deceptive. The humans did not rely on superior firepower or advanced technology to dominate their environment. Instead, they relied on ingenuity, resourcefulness, and above all, their ability to endure. Every corner of the base was designed to withstand extreme conditions. Deep underground bunkers had been built to survive earthquakes, nuclear blasts, and even direct impacts from space debris. In the medical facilities, humans had found ways to regenerate tissue and heal wounds far beyond what the Vraxians had believed possible. Thrasgor could not help but feel a growing sense of discomfort. The humans seemed to thrive in ways that made no sense, ways that contradicted everything the Vraxians knew about strength and survival. His warriors were uneasy as well, glancing around at the strange technology and the human-made structures that seemed so fragile, yet somehow endured through the harshest of conditions. There were no towering fortresses or indestructible ships like the Vraxians had come to expect from advanced civilizations. The humans had built their strength not from the physical and technological might that the Vraxians prized, but from something far more subtle. They had learned to survive in ways that transcended conventional notions of power. Commander Thrasgore's doubts continued to grow as he observed the humans interacting with their environment. They moved with ease in a world that, by all accounts, should have been hostile to them. They seemed at home in places that would have obliterated most other species. It was as though they had become one with the planet itself, adapting to its rhythms and dangers with a natural ease that seemed almost unnatural. The more Thrasgore thought about it, the more he realized that the humans were not just resilient. They were something far more terrifying. They had learned to survive without the need for superior technology, without the need for overwhelming force. They had become the masters of their environment, and that made them unpredictable and dangerous. As the day wore on and the Vraxian delegation toured the base, Thrasgore found himself more and more unsettled. The humans were not the weak, vulnerable species he had expected them to be. They were survivors in the truest sense of the word, and that made them a threat unlike any the Vraxians had ever encountered. The commander's mind raced as he tried to assess the danger they posed, but the more he learned, the more he realized that the true power of humanity was something that no species in the galaxy had yet understood. The Vraxians had thought they were the galaxy's strongest, but now, Thrasgore was beginning to wonder if they had just encountered a species that was more dangerous than any they had ever faced. And the worst part? He didn't know how to fight them. The tension in the air had shifted, and Commander Thrasgore could feel it weighing heavily on him as the day continued. The humans, despite their frail, unprotected bodies, seemed unaffected by the planet's challenges. It was as though they had been born to thrive in the harshest environments, defying logic and expectations. Thrasgore had seen countless species, each more resilient than the last, but none had displayed the kind of survival instinct that the humans exhibited. The realization gnawed at him. His people, the Vraxians, who had long considered themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, were no longer standing at the top of the food chain. The humans' survival skills, their ability to adapt to virtually any environment, and their capacity to withstand dangers that would decimate other species, made them something altogether different. Thrasgore's thoughts kept returning to the radiation levels detected by his sensors, the dangerous levels that should have been lethal for any unprotected organism. But there they stood, the humans, in the very heart of it all, without even the slightest sign of harm. His people had always prided themselves on their physical superiority, their tough exoskeletons, and their natural resistance to toxins. But the humans were different. They did not rely on the same defenses, and yet they had managed to conquer their world in ways that were almost supernatural. General Elena Reyes, with her calm demeanor, continued to explain how humans had adapted over generations, their bodies, evolving to withstand extreme radiation and toxic environments. Thrasgore's mind raced as he processed this new information. The humans had developed natural resistance to radiation, a feat that even the most dangerous Death World species could not claim. It was almost as if they had rewritten the laws of biology itself. And the more the Vraxian commander learned about their world, the more perplexed he became. The humans had not just survived the challenges of their environment, they had thrived. The very planet that seemed so deadly to outsiders had nurtured them, shaping them into a species that could withstand the most extreme conditions. Thrasgore found himself struggling to understand how this could be possible. He had encountered planets filled with deadly atmospheres, lethal radiation, and predators that could tear apart even the hardiest of species. Yet, these humans had not only endured, they had evolved in response to their world's dangers. As the diplomatic meeting continued, Thrasgore's unease only deepened. He had assumed that humanity, like many other species, would be dependent on technology to overcome their limitations. But the humans did not seem to need it. Their technology, while advanced in many areas, did not seem to give them an edge over the natural world. Instead, it appeared that their true power lay in their ability to endure and adapt. The Vraxians had always relied on their physical strength, their advanced weaponry, and their natural resilience to survive in hostile environments. But the humans had discovered a way to overcome their limitations without relying on brute force. It was their adaptability, their ability to evolve with their surroundings, that made them so formidable. The diplomatic exchange progressed, and the humans shared more of their capabilities, each revelation further confounding Thraskor. They spoke of nuclear testing, of weapons that far surpassed anything in the Vraxian arsenal, yet they had survived them without so much as a scratch. They described deep-sea exploration vessels that could withstand the immense pressures of the oceans, depths where even the Vraxian warships would be crushed in an instant. The Vraxians, known for their superior engineering and robust designs, could not fathom how such fragile creatures could endure the impossible. Yet, the humans had done just that. They had survived the extreme depths of the ocean, the crushing forces that would destroy even the toughest of species. It was as though the very environment had become part of their evolutionary design, something they could not just survive, but conquer. The most astonishing revelation came when a human soldier, in the middle of a demonstration, ingested a substance that, on the surface, seemed harmless. The soldier was about to spar with one of Thraskor's elite warriors, and the commander's keen eyes quickly took note of the soldier's actions. A small capsule was swallowed before the match began. Thraskor's curiosity piqued, and he demanded to know what the substance was. General Reyes, without hesitation, explained that it was caffeine, a mild stimulant. Thraskor's mind raced as he processed this information. The substance, according to his analysis, was nothing less than a lethal neurotoxin to most of the conquered species, including the Vraxians. Yet, this human soldier, seemingly unbothered by the ingestion, was about to engage in a sparring match that would test the limits of his physical strength and endurance. As the demonstration progressed, Thraskor could not ignore the growing discomfort in his mind. The human soldiers, despite their fragile bodies, were capable of feats that would have been impossible for most species, including the Vraxians. They had learned to adapt in ways that no one had anticipated, mastering their bodies and their environment in ways that defied logic. The more Thraskor learned about humanity, the more he began to understand that this species was not to be underestimated. They had found ways to conquer the impossible, to survive where others would have perished, and that made them more dangerous than any enemy the Vraxians had ever faced. The final revelation came during a shared meal between the Vraxian delegation and the humans. The humans had gone out of their way to prepare a meal for their guests, ensuring that the food was compatible with the Vraxian physiology. However, as the Vraxians tasted the human food, they were horrified to discover something unsettling. The human cuisine contained compounds that, when analyzed by Thraskor's sensors, would dissolve Vraxian exoskeletons on contact. The very food they had consumed was so acidic that it could tear through the protective layers that the Vraxians relied on for survival. Thraskor's mandibles trembled as he realized the implications of this discovery. The humans had created food so potent, so corrosive, that it could destroy the very thing that made the Vraxians formidable. It was as though they had designed their cuisine to be a weapon, one that could take down even the most powerful species in the galaxy. In that moment, Thraskor understood something profound. The humans were not just surviving in a harsh world, they were mastering it. They had learned to bend the laws of nature to their will, adapting to every challenge and emerging stronger from it. They had become something far more terrifying than mere survivors. They had become masters of their environment, and that made them unpredictable and deadly. The Vraxians had always relied on their physical strength, their armor, and their technological advancements to survive in hostile environments. But the humans had found a way to survive without relying on these crutches. And that, more than anything else, was what made them the most dangerous species the Vraxians had ever encountered. The sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield where Commander Thrasgore's forces stood at attention, their armor gleaming in the fading light. His thoughts raced, yet no matter how much he tried to focus, his mind continually returned to the humans. It was as though a new force had emerged, one that defied all logic and crushed everything his species had once believed to be true. The more he learned, the more unsettled he became. No matter the situation, humans had this uncanny ability to turn every challenge to their advantage. He had witnessed it firsthand in the last few weeks, in ways that left him reeling with disbelief. What stood before the Vraxians now was a species that had evolved to thrive in extreme conditions, no matter the odds. Thrasgore, whose people had conquered death world after death world, suddenly found himself questioning the very notion of survival. The Vraxians had always believed that strength was their greatest asset, but humans didn't just rely on their physical form. They didn't need to. They adapted, rapidly, intelligently, and in ways that defied natural laws. When faced with challenges, they didn't run, didn't flee to safety. They confronted them head-on and overcame them. As the meeting between the Vraxians and humans continued, Thrasgore's gaze swept across the faces of the human soldiers, gathered before him. There was something disconcerting in their eyes. Not fear, but a quiet, unwavering confidence that made Thrasgore uneasy. Each human seemed to radiate the same silent resolve that somehow seeped into every interaction. They didn't hide behind weapons or shields. They didn't need to. Every action was deliberate, every word carefully measured. It wasn't the arrogance that one would expect from a species on the brink of domination, but something more subtle, a deeply ingrained belief that no matter what happened, they would survive. They would prevail. The humans spoke of their history, of how they had battled against their planet's volatile forces, from natural disasters to diseases that decimated populations, yet they had always found a way to rebuild, to adapt. It was as though the very idea of defeat was foreign to them. Their culture, their history, was one of constant innovation, a relentless drive to conquer the next challenge before them. Where most species would have faltered, humanity had pushed forward with an unyielding determination. It wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving against the odds, even when everything seemed to be against them, even when the world around them crumbled. Humans found a way to press on. Thrasgore's thoughts darkened as he recalled the combat training demonstrations. His elite warriors, those who had been honed through years of brutal combat and battlefield strategy, had been thoroughly outmatched by the humans. The sparring sessions, meant to showcase Vraxian superiority, had turned into a grim reminder of just how far humans had come. The Vraxian warriors, despite their superior size and strength, were unable to land a single blow on the human soldiers, who danced around them with ease. It wasn't just their physical prowess that made them dangerous. It was their speed, their strategy, their intellect. Humans didn't simply fight. They thought, they calculated, and they anticipated every move. Thrasgore's pride had been wounded, but it wasn't the loss of face that bothered him most. What truly unsettled him was the realization that his warriors, even with their advanced training and natural abilities, might never be able to match the ingenuity of the humans. His people were known for their speed and strength, their resilience in battle. But the humans? They fought with something else. They fought with an unbreakable will, an unwavering belief that they could never lose. It was a mindset, a mentality that couldn't be broken, no matter how strong the opponent. The Vraxians had spent generations refining their fighting techniques, enhancing their bodies, and perfecting their technology. Yet they were facing an enemy that didn't need such enhancements. They relied on something far more unpredictable, something far more dangerous. The Vraxian commander couldn't shake the image of the human soldier who had demonstrated the power of their advanced technology. Unlike anything Thrasgore had seen before, the human had activated a small, seemingly insignificant device, and in an instant, the battlefield had transformed. It wasn't the weaponry that intrigued him. It was the strategy, the way the human had anticipated every move, every possible outcome before it even unfolded. The soldier had known exactly what to do, exactly how to respond to the shifting conditions, and had done so with a grace and efficiency that left Thrasgore speechless. Yet, it wasn't just the soldiers who were impressive. It was the humans' ability to think as a collective, their unity, and the way they cooperated across vast distances. The Vraxians, although technologically advanced, had never quite mastered the art of working in unison as the humans did. While their fleets were powerful, they lacked the cohesive, adaptive mindset that humanity displayed. Even in the direst of circumstances, the humans knew how to come together, how to think as one, and how to push forward, no matter the odds. In the midst of all this, Thrasgore found himself grappling with a bitter truth. He had underestimated the humans. He had assumed that their physical form was their greatest limitation, that their vulnerability was something he could exploit. But as he watched them, learned more about them, he realized that their vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was merely a challenge to be overcome, an obstacle to be adapted to. What Thrasgore had missed was that humans didn't need to be the strongest in every encounter. They only needed to be the smartest, the quickest, and the most determined. And that, he realized, was far more dangerous than any weapon the Vraxians could ever produce. As the evening drew to a close and the meeting ended, Thrasgore found himself lingering behind, staring into the vast distance. The stars above seemed to mock him, as if to remind him of just how much he had to learn. He had come to this planet with the intention of showing the humans their place in the galaxy. But now, for the first time in his life, Thrasgore was filled with doubt. The humans had become something far more than just another species to conquer. They were a force of nature, and no matter how much his people tried to deny it, the humans had already begun to reshape the galaxy in their own image. Thrasgore couldn't help but wonder if the Vraxians were already too far gone, trapped in their own ways, to ever truly comprehend the full scale of what was unfolding. The realization was sobering. His people had always prided themselves on their superiority, on their ability to adapt and overcome. But now, he was faced with a new reality. The humans had done something that the Vraxians had never been able to do. They had taken the impossible and made it their reality. And that, more than anything, was what made them so terrifying.